I think the best time spent is to be talking to sellers that are qualified, that are interested in selling, building those relationships, nurturing those leads, and making those offers, getting those properties under contract. And then you hire out the brutal side of it, the cold calling where you're getting the no's and all of that stuff.
Hey guys, my name is Sharad. I am the owner and founder of REsimpli, also an active investor in Northwest Indiana, right outside of Chicago. I invest in Northwest Indiana market. I do fix and flip, a little bit of wholesaling, very minimal wholesaling, but we do direct to seller marketing, PPC, direct mail, and we're looking to add a little bit of cold calling in the mix after listening to Ty today to just do a little bit of cold calling and then PPC. So those are primary marketing channels. I also own a property management company. We do turnkey and fix and flip. So if you have any questions on that, more than happy to answer. Ty, welcome to the call. So Ty is a great investor. He's been crushing it with cold calling. So we wanted to bring him on and just talk a little bit about the process that he's using in his business, what's working and what's not working. So Ty, if you can give us a little bit background about yourself, and then we can jump right into it.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you for having me on. Hope everybody's having a great day and can hear me okay. So a little bit background about myself. I started out wholesaling. It was my first initial introduction to real estate on the investment side in 2019. So I started doing that. Prior to that, I was working in a logistics company as a broker. So I was doing a lot of cold calling then, but I was cold calling, million and billion dollar companies trying to earn their business to kind of route their shipments. So when I figured out about wholesaling and real estate, it was pretty much the similar concept, but just a different industry. So I kind of took those skill sets from that and applied it to wholesaling real estate. So I've been wholesaling for, like I said, since 2019. Took me about 6 months to close my first deal. Went through the ups and downs, ebbs and flows, trying different strategies, different marketing strategies, different softwares, and all these different things. Bandit signs, text messaging, direct mail, sending out mailers, leaving voicemails, all of the whole thing. And then, once I got that first deal, I took some of my most of the profits and reinvested it back into the company. And the way that I did that was I first hired a cold caller because I knew that cold calling was something that I didn't want to do, that I can hire out. And I wanted to focus all of my energy and efforts on actually talking to qualified opportunities rather than spending my time, talking to the people who are not interested, telling you to F off and screw off and all these different things, right? And sitting on that dialer because it's so time consuming. So while I was doing, in my first couple months of, learning the business, I was doing a lot of cold calling, switched over to cold calling. And then I realized that this is not something that I want to consistently do because that's not where my time is best spent. So took the money from my first deal, reinvested it, hired a cold caller, my first cold caller, and then I invested into the softwares to cold call, which was Call Tools, which I still use to this day. And then I invested into more data, right? So I got more data to skip trace and to provide for my callers to cycle and filter through, so I can create more leads and more opportunities. And I've been doing it ever since then. Kind of, cold calling has been my primary marketing source. I, dabbled into SMS a little bit before the regulations got involved, and I'm starting to dabble back into it a little bit now. But through all of that, I've closed over 78 deals now to this date. Started doing a lot. It was mainly wholesales, did some hotels, did some flips, and just recently acquired like my first, sub two property, along with I did a couple novations as well. So that's a little bit of background about me. After that, once I got started into the real estate space, in about 9 months, closed, enough deals to, fire my boss. What I like to say, I didn't quit, I fired them and went full time and started doing this full time ever since 2021, and kind of been still here doing it. So that's kind of a little bit my story.
Awesome, Ty. Thank you for sharing that and congratulations on all the success. So you've
Thanks.
done 78 deals, you said?
Yeah, 78.
Majority of them have come from cold calling?
Yes, majority of them
Okay.
came from cold calling. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are you still doing the cold calling or do you have a cold caller that does the calling?
I have a cold caller that does it. I don't think I'll ever do the cold calling again. So, it's just the time, the time that's required to cold call. It requires you to, and I tell a lot of people this all the time. If you're going to cold call, you have to be consistent with doing it. You can't cold call for an hour and then stop, and then cold call for another hour and then stop. Like, to see success with cold calling to generate leads, you have to sit in your seat for at least 3 hours straight. You know what I mean? And consistently dial and consistently dial. So, and that's not where, I would say my time or anybody's time is well spent, served, right? Doing. So I think the best time spent is to be talking to sellers that are qualified, that are interested in selling, building those relationships, nurturing those leads, and making those offers, getting those properties under contract. And then you hire out the brutal side of it, the cold calling where you're getting the nose and all of that stuff. So I don't do any cold calling right now. All I do is following up in acquisitions and dispositions and transactions is what I do.
And there was a question, how many cold calls do you have right now? Just one? Or you
Yeah,
have
right now
multiple?
I just have one. I'm about to bring on another cold caller here soon. But right now is one. I used to have 6 or 7 back when the market was hot and guns are blazing. But market changed in like last year, and then we kind of dialed it back down. And I really just did a whole reset this year of my whole business and just started, kind of how I started in the beginning. Had a business partner that went to crap, and then we kind of split, and then I started rebuilding myself.
Okay. All right, there's a couple of questions, but about your cold caller, where is that person based out of?
She's based out of the Philippines, and she's been with me ever since 2020.
And how did you find your cold caller?
Yeah, so all of my cold callers, I go through a Facebook group called REVA, REVA, Real Estate Virtual Assistants. And what I do
Okay.
typically there is I'll make a post and I'll just pretty much put a post up stating what am I looking for, right? I'll put the pay rate that I'm looking to pay, the hours that I'm looking to work, that I'm expecting them to work, the days that I'm expecting them to work. Also, I'll put, the position, which is cold calling. I always put, I'm looking for some experience, right? I want a little bit of experience. You don't have to be the best, but I want some sort of experience so you understand what wholesale and real estate is. And that way I can fine tune them to fit my business. And then also in that ad, I have them send me a voice recording so I can kind of see what that accent sounds like. If it's a strong accent, a deep accent, because I want to make sure I review that. Because when they're calling, senior citizens and people that's American, you want them to be able to understand the caller, right? I have them send that over along with their, resume and stuff like that.
And then the Riva Facebook group, there's a company with similar name, Riva Global. It's not that, it's a separate Facebook group, right? I assume.
Yeah, it's a separate one.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Reva is going to
Yeah,
have like a
there's a
lime
company.
green background or something
Oh,
like
okay,
that.
okay.
Yeah, it's going to say REVA. Yep, 70,000 people in there, I think. So once you post something
Interesting.
on there, they'll be responding quickly.
Yeah, that's a great resource. And how much are you, mind sharing, how much are you paying
Yeah.
your cold caller? How much did that person start out with? How much are they making now? And if they have any incentives?
Yeah, so I started her out with $5 per hour, and she was working part time, and then we got her up to $7 per hour over the years,
Okay.
right? And now she's
Okay.
working full time, right? And then the incentives that I pay now is $300 per deal closed. So any deal that
Okay.
I close that comes over from a lead that she submitted, she gets $300 commission or bonus for that particular deal.
Is she only helping you with acquisition or she does a little bit of disposition also for you?
She just does acquisitions. I'm going to start training her a little bit to get into the making offers and kind of thing as well, like a
Got
hybrid
it.
kind of situation.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. So it's a very simple setup. She does the calls. Any person that's like qualified, whatever criteria, she kicks the person over to you, and then you take it from there.
There you go. Correct. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. So there's a question from Rachel. What's your dial to deal ratio?
My dial to deal ratio.
Like how
I don't
many?
know. I'm not big on my KPIs, so I'll be honest with you. I haven't really dug into it that much to that extent. I do know she dials about 17 on average, 17,000 dials a day. So that's working a full 8-hour shift, 4 hours in from 9 to 1.
17,000 dials?
Yeah, 17,000 dials. Yeah.
So what list are you pulling for that?
So I do a lot of lists. So I have a lot of campaigns set up. So I do pre-foreclosures, I do probates, I do tax delinquent, I do code violations, I do absentee, I do fire damage, I do water shut off, and then I do expired listings.
Okay. And then the water shut off you're getting directly from
The
the
county.
city, the
Yeah, the
county. Okay.
city, county. Yep.
Got it. And the other list, are you pulling them from PropStream?
No, the
The
only list that
pre-for.
I'm pulling from PropStream is my absentee owner list. Everything else I'm getting directly from the city or from the county. I have a data
Perfect.
guy who's managing my data, who goes to those websites, scrubs the information, puts them in an Excel file for me. If they're not already in an Excel file, he emails them to me, and then I'll skip trace it, send it back to him, and then he'll upload it to Call Tools for my marketing.
Perfect. All right. So this way you're getting the most up-to-date data because you're getting it
Correct.
from the county. Perfect.
Correct.
So you have what are some of the KPIs that you're holding your cold caller accountable? Is it just like number of dials she's making, or is it like how many qualified leads she's
For
kicking
me,
over to you?
I really focus on the qualified leads. That's the only thing that I
Okay.
really care about. But I also pay attention to the amount of dials because the numbers tell a story, right? I had situations where I was dealing with other cold callers, and let's say I pay attention to the number of contacts. That's what's most important to me as well. So the number of contacts, people that are answering the phone, whether they're saying hello, no, yes, whatever the case may be, I pay attention to that. So she's on average, I think she's probably around 200 contacts per day. And based off of those KPIs, I can tell what kind of day she's having. So if she worked a half a day, then those contacts, that the average contact was probably going to be at around 100. So in previous experiences, I've noticed one caller had way less contacts than she did, and they were working the same amount of hours. So I was able to identify that that other caller was stealing time, right? After a call, she would sit for 20 minutes after a call before hitting the next call or whatever the case may be, and I noticed that. So now I pay attention to the contacts, because that lets me know how often they're actually on the phones and talking to people.
Got it. And then one question I have is because it can be very mundane to do cold calling. How do you keep your, VA kind of motivated? Just are you checking in with her daily? How often are you connecting with your VA that's
Yeah, so
making
we
the
do
cold call?
bi-weekly meetings. So I meet up with her bi-weekly. And during these meetings, we'll pull some calls, right, from what from previous weeks. We'll review those. So we'll do like, call critiques, and we'll listen to the calls and see where she could have done better. We'll pull actual leads that she's converted to see if she missed any information. We also pull leads that said they're not interested, just so we can see if there is not leads, but prospects that are not interested, to see if there was some opportunity there that we probably missed out on. And we kind of review the script as well. So I pretty much go through the script with her again, just to make sure that she's hitting the script verbatim. Because the key to the way I go about it, and I think the key to cold calling in general, is making sure that you keep your script pretty simple and effective. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is when she's making a call, she's introducing herself. Hey, this is Dana. I was calling about your property. Well, her script is, hey, this is Dana. Is this Sherrod? Right? Yes. Or she might say, hey, Dana, this is Sherrod. Or she might say, hey, Sherrod, this is Dana. How you doing today? Right? I was calling about your property on 123 Main Street. Are you the owner of that property? And Sherrod says, yes, I am. So he's kind of, what's going on? Well, I was seeing if you'd be interested in the offer or consider selling that property. So it's really quick when it comes to that. That literally takes about 10 seconds to get through that part of it. And she does that repetitively over and over and over again, so she can be more efficient. Because at the end of the day, when you're cold calling, you want to make sure that you're not wasting too much time on people who are not interested, right? Because you will get some people that wants to talk just about anything and everything, but you want to make sure you qualify quickly so you don't spend that much time on those particular wasted opportunities.
So what's your criteria for qualification? Is it if they're interested in selling a property, that's pretty much it, and then she pushes that lead over to you?
Well, no. So that's just the initial qualification to see if it makes sense to continue forward, right? So the key criteria for me is the simple pillars, right? How soon are they looking to sell, right? What's their time
Right.
frame? If they give the condition, I don't really care about, cosmetic stuff, right? I want to know about the age of the roof, the water heater, AC units, the furnace, things like that. So I keep that part of the condition kind of minimal for her, because you don't want to give the cold caller too much to conversation, having too much
Right.
conversation with the sellers. So I do condition, about 4 questions on a condition, like I said, those main units, and then we talk about the time frame, the motivation. The motivation is not like digging into the motivation. It's more so like, hey, Sherrod, what has you thinking about selling this property at this time? And Sherrod may say, well, I'm looking to relocate. Okay, cool. That's a motivation, right? And then the last thing is price. Now, the price, the way I look at the price to qualify it, if it's 10% or less than the Zillow estimate, then we send that over as a lead. If it's more than 10% over that Zillow estimate, then we don't submit it as a lead unless the motivation is legitimate. And when I say she asks about the motivation, I want her to get surface level motivation. So when I call the seller, I dig deeper, because that's my goal, is to create that connection with the seller lead based off of the motivation and those pain points.
So is she doing a live transfer of the call? Let's say if she has someone on the call who's interested and then everything checks off, what is the process? Or is she kicking that lead over and then you review everything and then you kind of follow based on that?
Yeah, so what she does is she'll submit the lead over. So she'll send it to me on a Discord. So we communicate on Discord. So she'll send all the information on Discord, but then she'll push the lead over to REsimpli. And then once she pushes it over to REsimpli, I get a notification that the new lead came over. And then that lead gets an automatic text message that says, hey, so-and-so, this is Ty. You just spoke with my rep, Dana. I'm about to give you a call here shortly. So that lead gets that text message literally like 1 minute after it gets submitted to
Right.
REsimpli. Once they get that text message, if I'm in office, because sometimes I'm looking at properties, but as soon as it comes over, if I'm in the office, I usually make the call right then and there.
Got it. And what's your contact rate once the lead comes over? Because I've heard from many people, what happens is like when you're making the cold calling, you're making from a separate number. I'm sure the Dana is setting up the expectation. Hey, you're going to get a call from Ty
Yep.
from a different number. Do
Mm-hmm.
you ever lose any contact? Something falls through the crack while you're trying to make that transition from, the number that you used to call from call to now you use calling from different numbers and REsimpli.
Yeah, it happens from time to time. But I found out what alleviates that is that system that I set up when they get that text message from me immediately once the lead gets submitted into REsimpli. So what I've done, some people respond to it and they say, okay, I'll be waiting your call. I even had people call me first before I even reach back out to them, right? So I figured that I felt that system helped eliminate that missing piece of people going missing because of the different numbers and etc. But like you said, she sets the expectation and says, hey, my acquisition manager, Ty, will be giving you a call here shortly to give you that offer, right? So once, if they're serious, really serious about selling the property, then they're going 9 times out of 10, they'll respond or they'll answer the call.
Perfect. Right. Hannah has a question. So you only qualify them as lead if they give a purchase price of 10% less of the Zillow estimate. So if the Zillow estimate is 100,000, so you look at 90,000. If they're asking for less than 90, then they qualify. If they're asking for more than
No,
90.
I look for 110 or less, if that makes sense. So if the estimate is 100,000, if it's 10%
Okay.
over Zillow estimate or lower, that's when I send it over as a lead.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you have like if it's 100,000, if they're asking for less than 110, then so you have like very broad then okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any reason for that? Because a lot of sellers, they'll go to Google, they search their property address, and like typically, they kind of know what this estimate is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they use as an anchor on most cases. Hey, online says my house is worth 100. If they're asking 110, like how do you bring them down on the price? I'm very interested.
Yeah, so when it comes to that, right, it depends on the exit strategy as well, right? So now with the implementation of novations, you can offer a little bit more on the purchase price, right, for the sellers. And I implement novation strategy as well. So when it comes to that, a lot of times the Zestimate isn't always accurate, but sometimes it's somewhat accurate, but it really just depends on the property. So I feel like when I have them in that ballpark of what they're asking for, it might not necessarily be exactly what they're asking for, right? Because obviously I utilize my leverage on getting them to lower their price is, hey, that Zestimate that you're looking at, that's the price of your property if it was fixed up and renovated. That's how much it would sell for if it was fixed up, renovated, up to date, new this, new that, right? Your property does not look like that. So it's going to require $30,000 of renovation. So realistically, you can't expect, even if you decide to put your property on the market right now as it is, you won't get that because the ones that are selling for that are in better shape than yours. So I use that kind of as my leverage to bring
Got
that
it.
asking price down.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Okay. So yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I was thinking that you were taking 90% off this estimate, but taking 110% in. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Roy has a question. Can I get the Facebook page again to find VAs? You said it's Reva, REVA.
Yep, Reva,
Okay.
REVA, Real Estate Virtual Assistants, and it has like a lime green or green background when you search the page. It has like fifty
Okay.
thousand members in there, so you know.
Perfect. 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 That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'll find it. I'll look for it and see if I can find it. And I'll put the link to it. But for someone who's starting out, right? We're looking to pick up cold calling a little bit. Someone who's starting out, like what would you say some of the things that they need to watch out for, especially someone who's not able to dedicate like full time to it? I do agree with you that they need to, minimum do like 2 to 3 hours worth of calling. So your VA is calling during the normal business hours, I assume, right?
Yeah, so
And
I have her
nothing up.
call between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. And then I have her
Okay.
take like a 2 hour break. And then she comes back and calls from 4 p.m. to 3 hour break. Then she calls at from 4 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
And
And
yeah.
then do you guys do any calls on Saturdays or
Yep. On
Sundays?
Saturday, we call from 10 a.m. to same thing, from some 10 a.m. to 8. Well, no, from 9
And
to 8, really. Same time. Yeah.
90. Got it. Have you noticed your connection rate is better during morning,
It's
evening,
better. It's
weekend?
better in the evening for sure, right? But then you have to look
Okay.
at it from two different perspectives, right? You have most of the senior citizens or the older people, they answer their phones more so in the morning time. And then you have your middle-aged people who, they're working throughout the day. They're going to be the ones responding towards the evening time, right? When they get off of work. So you kind of get a balance of the two. It just really depends. But when I was cold calling, when I started cold calling, I figured out that Saturdays is valuable as well because a lot of people are off work. So that's when I had the most time to call at a given time. I wasn't able to call for 3 hours during the week. So I was like, okay, let me find out how the weekend works. So I started calling on Saturdays and I started generating more leads on Saturdays than I would during the week. And that's how I
Nice.
realized it's all about how long you're sitting in the seat for a consistent period of time versus how many times you're in the seat. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. David has a question. Do you get pictures of the property from the seller? And are these only in your market you're located in?
Yeah, so if the seller has pictures, I request them sometimes, but a lot of times they don't. And then if they do have them, they're probably old and outdated. So typically, my process is I go out there, whether I have boots on the ground to go out there for me, which is 90% of the time, unless the property is in the area that I'm close to, or it's a property that I'm really, 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 really interested in, is a great deal. I go in person to, meet the seller. And I feel like a lot of times when I meet the sellers in person, then I have a better chance of locking that deal up. But getting the pictures, usually I have boots on the ground or I go physically. And then I only do this in my market. So I'm only marketing in Atlanta and in Georgia. So I have a couple other markets, other sub cities in Georgia that I market to as well.
Got it. Okay. And guys, I put the link to the Facebook group. There's like almost 60,000 people in that Facebook group. So if you want to grab that link that Ty was talking about. So Ty, for someone who's starting out, like if they had to pick like one list that, they should go after, have you noticed like which list would you recommend? One that you've noticed in your experience work better than the others?
Yeah, it's absentee owners for sure. Absentee owners, but I always put a specific absentee owner. It's not one of these absentee owners that has, 15 properties, right? Narrow it down. This particular absentee owner only owns two properties, one which is their primary residence and one that they may have been their primary residence, might have been a rental, might have been something that they have inherited or something like that. They are more likely to let go of that second property that they have versus, keeping their primary residence. So that absentee owner particularly is unseasoned. They may not be a seasoned investor. And they may have just, like I said, they might just have this property because they tried to be an investor, might be out of it, may have inherited that property, and they're more willing to sell that property or more willing to talk about selling that property than they would be their primary residence. Some of the other lists might be a little bit more difficult, like pre-foreclosures. It has a lot more intricate pieces to deal with, a little bit more emotional to deal with. Probate, can take a long time as well. You have to understand the probate process. So I would say absentee owners, for someone that's new, that's beginning, that's you want to try to get a deal real quick or quicker, I would say, absentee owners with people who only own 2 properties max.
Interesting. I love that. Yeah. So you're not going after people. Like I own several properties in my market. So I would be an absentee owner, but typically when you're going after someone who owns like 4, 5 or more properties, they're generally more experienced, more seasoned, more sophisticated. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And same thing would apply to any other marketing. Even if you're doing direct mail, you would still want to go after people that own 2 properties and no more than 2, or maybe you could go up to 3 if you really want to do that. That's actually a really great tip. And all right, and then what about the equity percentage and what's the years of ownership that you're looking at for them?
Yeah, so I look at minimum 7 years of ownership or more, right? So you have to own it for at least 7 years or more, because especially now you'll get people who bought these properties years ago and they got more equity now. The values in 7 years from the time that they own it to now, they have some equity, and you can do something with it, whether it's a novation or whatever the case may be. You can do something with that property. But typically, if I'm doing an absentee owners list, I'm putting at least 60% equity, at least 60%.
Okay, so you're going like 60. We typically do 30% or more, and we do 5 years of ownership, but we also include unknown equity and unknown last sale date. Do you include that? Do you notice anything? I mean, you're in a much bigger market than I'm in. So if you do 30% 5 years on, your list is going to be like really a large list. So we're in a small market, so we do 30% and 5 years of ownership. And how often are you pulling your list? That's another thing that, a lot of investors ask is like, how often do you go back and pull the same list?
Yeah, so my pre-foreclosures and probates, I pull those lists every day. I have my VA, he's scrubbing those lists every day because the data on that updates pretty much daily. As somebody dies every day, somebody, because I get my pre-foreclosures directly from the foreclosure attorney's website. And here's a tip for some of you guys out there. So if you start looking at the foreclosing attorney's websites, okay, because some of these foreclosing attorney websites, they have lists of all the foreclosure sales that's coming up either that month or the next month. And you can start scrubbing that information and having your pre-foreclosure list ready to go, right? So I pull those every day, pre-foreclosures and probates. People die every day. And then that's on a day-to-day. And then every week I do expired listings. And then every 3 months I do the other ones. I do like the tax delinquent, I do absentee, I do code enforcements, fire damage and stuff like that, because they don't update as frequently as these ones do.
Okay, so absentee, you're updating every 3 months. Absentee and tax delinquent, you're doing every 3 months. But all the other ones, pre-foreclosure, you're doing it daily, like
daily, correct?
And then you're getting it from the county. So even the pre-foreclosure ones, those that you get, because that's not a very big list that you get as compared to absentee, those are still going to Dana, and she's making the initial call, because these generally tend to be time sensitive. They have like 3, 4, 5 weeks where they need to make a decision and move on. They still go to Dana, follow the same process.
Yeah, they still go through her, follow the same process. Whenever she gets one, I'm on the phones ready to go immediately. So once she submits that lead over, I'm calling them immediately because she lets me know because I pretty much designate, she understands what campaigns are going to be priority. Every day pre-foreclosure campaign is first priority. Once she gets through that, she's going through the probate. And then after the probate, she's going through whatever else we decide, absentee owners or whatever, because priority is always pre-foreclosure.
Got it. All right, Jason has a question. Do you send anything via mail, like any direct mail to any of the
I
list
do
in
not
addition
do
to
any direct mail or postcards right now. The only
Okay.
marketing channel that I have right now is cold calling, and I'm starting to implement SMS this week, actually.
Got it. So you're just doing cold calling and
Mhm.
SMS after that. And who's going to be managing SMS for you? Dana
I-
or someone?
I'm gonna probably hire a VA to do it, but I want to test it out because the main thing for me
Okay.
is seeing what terminology I can use, how many messages I can send without getting
Yeah.
flagged, all these different things. What should I say, stop to end, or should I say end to opt out? Because I'm thinking people now are trained to say stop versus say end to opt out. So it's like certain little things, intricate things like that is what I'm testing to see which best works. And then obviously, templates and all these different things too.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just say we've had several conversations with Twilio. Just be careful because, it can, like, you can get shut down pretty quickly if your opt-out rate or spam rate is pretty high.
Right.
Cool. All right. Yeah, so you don't have, I mean, even with the ones that it becomes a lead, because what I've seen sometimes happens is a person becomes a lead, you try to get in touch with them, they don't pick up their phone, especially if you're doing pre-foreclosure or some other, a lot of these people, sellers can sometimes be not have a sense of urgency. You're
Mm-hmm.
still just following up with code. If they don't pick up, then you don't have any other way that you get in touch with, like even door knocking or anything, especially if it's in a market that you invest in.
Yeah, I haven't
Or,
implemented door knocking because I don't have the manpower
okay,
to do so, right? It's just me
got
doing
it.
acquisitions. So I'm very relentless when it comes to acquisitions. Actually, the sub two deal that I just purchased that I just got last week was a pre-foreclosure. He came in the system, and this is an example of what you're talking about. He came in the system. I called him, he didn't answer. Called him back, he didn't answer. Like, I do double calls right then immediately. So he got that first initial text message once he came over into the system. Then I called him twice back to back. He didn't answer. Then I called him again, probably like 3 hours later. He didn't answer. Then I texted him again and then he didn't answer. Then he ended up texting me back and said, "Hey, man, I got your text. I've been a little busy. I'll give you a call back." Okay. And I was like, "Okay, I got you." So he ended up calling me back the next day. And then I got that one done. And he was going to pre-foreclosure literally like the next week, and I was able to get it done. But it's just I'm very relentless when it comes to my follow-up and my acquisitions, and you have to be.
Okay. And another question I have is how often, let's say you pull your list on Jan 1st, right? You have, let's say, a list of 10,000 people. How often are you calling the same list? Let's say you get through all the numbers. What's your cadence of calling them back again?
Once I get through a list or get through a campaign, I'm recycling it and I'm going through it again. But like I said, it's going to be pre-foreclosure is going to hold the highest priority. So even
Right.
though people may have, let's say I pulled a pre-foreclosure list in January, right? And I'm still going through that same pre-foreclosure data because, and here's the reason why. Some of those people may have gotten extensions. Some of them may have gotten loan modifications. Some of them may have gotten, may have reinstated the loan. But if they were in a financial hardship once, I'm going to assume that they're going to be in a financial hardship again at some point, right? Especially on the
Right.
same property. So I keep recycling and going through my data because one, I paid to skip trace it, and then two, it's quality data. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna go
Okay.
ahead and go through it over and over again.
All right. Question from Jason. Where are you getting the phone numbers for pre-REO or your pre-foreclosure deals?
Yeah, so I skip through Skip Matrix. That's my skip tracing
Skip
company
me.
that I use. Yeah. And the
Got
reason
it.
why I use them because they have a lot of different data points. They give me relatives and associates and all that stuff too.
All right. Rachel has two questions. Do you happen to know how many
Conversions.
conversions or qualified leads or opportunities are typically created from like 200 contacts? And how
Well,
long are your
it
campaigns?
depends on the day. Usually I get probably like 2 leads per day. It's kind of what we're at right now. My qualifications are really strict. So if I loosen up my qualifications, I can get as many leads as I want. But at the end of the day, being that I'm the only one doing my acquisitions, I want to make sure that the people that I'm talking to are serious and legit about selling their
Okay.
property. Because previously, I used to have a system where, hey, anybody who raises their hand, that's going to be somebody that we pursue. And, but, sometimes those people, well, what's your offer? What's your offer? They're not serious. So when I come in to do acquisitions and I have a day of calling 50 of those people, it gets really unmotivating for me as an acquisitions guy when I'm talking to somebody and they saying, well, I don't want to sell, or I'm not serious about selling, or I want $5 million for the property. So I made sure that I got real strict and intentional on my qualifications to eliminate that.
Okay, so the quality over quantity.
100%. 100%.
And then how long are your campaigns?
What do you mean by how long? As far as how much data is in each campaign, or how long do they
Rachel, do you
last?
want to clarify that? Yeah, I'm not sure. And yeah, length of time.
So it just really
Like I guess
depends on the list, right? So I have my probate campaign has probably about 7,000 records in it, and that's the one that takes the longest. It might take Dana by herself. It'll take her probably 2 weeks to get through all that data. My pre-foreclosure is usually about 900, so it might take her about a week to get through, a couple days actually, to get through that pre-foreclosure data. So, but all of my campaigns have different amount of opportunities and prospects in them.
yeah, Jess, this is being recorded. So yeah, you can go back and rewatch. And one question I have, like, what do you do with you skip trace? What do you do with DNC or litigators?
I call them. I call them. The only way I mark
Even
them
the
DNC,
litigators?
yeah, only way I mark them as DNC in my system is they tell us do not call.
Okay. And then so you're even calling anyone that's get flagged as litigator, you still call
Yep, I'm
them.
calling everybody. Yep, I've been doing
Right.
that since I started. I have never had an issue. Now everybody, to each his own,
Yeah.
but yeah, I haven't had an issue.
All right. So once you start calling, who do you take off the list? Only people that say do not call, or do you have certain number of times you call the people, then after that you're like, hey, we've tried this person 10 times, 10 different occasions, we're not getting in touch, let's take them off the list. What's your criteria on that?
Yeah, so for me, do not call and not interested, right? I take those people off my list when it comes to the marketing side of it. Now, if they come over
Okay.
as a lead and they were interested initially, and then when I call them and they change their mind, well, that's a different conversation, right? That person is still going to get contacted. But
Got it.
in marketing, if they say not interested, we're not going to waste our time and energy focusing on the not interested. We're just going to keep burning through to find, because marketing, especially cold calling, it's about cycling through and finding the needle in the haystack, right? So you just have to keep burning through until you find those opportunities. But usually when I'm recycling my list, I'm not recycling the not interested, at least not yet. Maybe I'll do that in a year from when they became not interested. I haven't done it yet this year, but you can recycle your not interested and go through those as well. But right now, I'm just recycling the contacts that we weren't able to get in contact with, or they hung up, and things like that. No answers and stuff like that.
Got it. So if someone says not interested for now, they're just off your list forever. And then
Correct.
you may add them back like a year or so later because their situation may have changed at that
There you
point.
go. There you go.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right, question from Kale. Do you call and text multiple times to initially speak? Now that's a great question. So yeah, there's a couple of other questions, but yeah, do you call and text multiple times to initially speak?
Not on the marketing side, right? So once they come over as a lead, then that's when I'm a hound. I'm like very aggressive and persistent to try to get them on the phone. On the marketing side, it's just we just calling. If they pick up, we have a conversation, cool. If not, we just keep going until we find those opportunities. So that will only be if Dana qualifies them. That's when I'm calling. That's when I'm texting. That's when I'm being relentless on trying to get them back on the phone.
All right, yeah. So the other part of it, would that only be after? So after that, after Dana pushes the lead over to you, then you call them a couple of times. Yeah. So follow up to that is, does Dana tell them to expect your number and name to call them?
Yeah, she tells them to expect me to call, because I might call from a different number depending on the campaign, right? I should probably do that, give the number out as well, but I just tell them my name, and the name does
Okay.
enough. Yeah.
Okay. And do you leave, or does Dana leave actual voicemail, or these are ringless voicemail, like pre-recorded voicemail that she's leaving?
For some campaigns, yes. So like for absentee owners, she probably does. It just depends on the situation in different campaigns, but generally we do not. But for certain campaigns like those pre-foreclosures, we're leaving voicemails on those. And then I leave voicemails too when they come over as leads if I can't get them on the line.
And what's your timeline for from the time lead comes over, Dana pushes the lead over to you, to the time it takes you to actually get the contract with them?
Oh, that's right now. That could take right now is probably about, depending on the lead, right? Foreclosures move pretty quickly, obviously. but on average, I would say probably about 70 to 80 days, probably getting them under
70
contract.
to 80.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
cold
then you
calling,
have some absentee where
yeah,
yeah,
cold
then you have
calling
to
when
do a
it
lot of
comes to
follow-ups
lead
on
the
them.
contract is a little bit longer.
Got it. Yeah, because I would imagine on the absentee ones, those are going to take much longer, much longer process. You're putting them on a drip campaign and trying to warm up those leads
Hmm.
and try to get them back. Cool. Yeah. Guys, any what other questions you have for Ty? Right. How do you organize your recontacts versus someone who has said they're not interested so they do not get lost?
Yeah, so inside of the dialer call tools inside of the platform, when you're recycling the campaigns, basically it's up to your caller to put the right disposition, right? So that disposition might be not interested, it might be wrong number, it might be DNC. So after every conversation that my VA or my caller is having with a prospect, after the call is over, she'll submit what that disposition is, right? That disposition, like I said, it might be wrong number, DNC, not interested, right? And when it's time to recycle that information, then I'm not adding those dispositions in my recycle. I'm adding the ones that, you know, did not answer, no answer, or call back, or whatever the case may be, depending on what the disposition might be. So that's how you kind of keep it organized when it comes to, keeping the contacts organized and responding back to them again.
Got it. And then Rachel has a question. So, how many times does Dana call a phone number that doesn't answer, or for maybe for pre-foreclosure absentee list?
Yeah, so I have in call tools, I have some rules set up, right? So if the number is very intricate. So when the numbers, let's say we dial it, it has a rule set up to dial that number like 3 hours later or 10 minutes later. It's minimum 10 minutes, but it has to dial that same number 10 minutes later. And you can set it up to how frequently you want it, how soon you want it to dial that same number before it moves to the next number, right? Or before you go on to the next contact. So depending on the campaign, we'll probably dial it maybe 3 times during that day or during that campaign or during that session, whatever she's dialing. And that's pretty much how we do it there. It's just depending on the rules and how you set it up for whatever campaign.
Got it. Right. Kale has a question. How do you do the full rehab estimate to give the right price? Do you ultimately bring a contractor? Do you do your own assessment at your visit?
Yeah, I do my own assessment at my visit. So initially when I first got started, I didn't know anything about repair costs and what things cost, right? So what I did was I reached out to buyers, and I kind of asked the buyers, like, how much would it cost to renovate this kitchen? How much would it cost to do the floors per square foot? How much would it cost to do paint per square foot? So I started gauging what buyers would normally be paying for their renovations to get my estimates. And then once I started doing my own flips, I knew what things cost because I spent my money on it, right? So when I'm not bringing a contractor there unless I'm doing my own flip usually. But that's pretty much that's pretty much how I've determined the estimate.
Cool. All right. Tara has a question that I'm very curious about. What are the biggest mistakes you made in first 3 or 6 months in your business that newbie wholesaler should be aware of? So when you look back at everything you've done with cold calling, what are some of the biggest mistakes that newer investors need to be aware of?
Managing the VAs when it comes to cold calling, looking at your KPIs, looking at your metrics, and managing. If you're doing VAs, like managing your VAs and making sure they're not stealing time from you, right? So, having those weekly meetings, having those check-ins. One thing I realized is if you have callers, you have to stay connected to them. You have to have conversations with them. Treat them as real people, right? Even though they may be on the other side of the world, you still need to check in with them. You still need to understand what their wants and what their needs are because they are your employees, right? You should care for them as such. And it shouldn't just be, I only talk to you about work and all of this, right? And you want to make sure you stay checked in with them as well. So when I say that is have your weekly meetings, at least initially when you first get started, so you guys can then understand how each other work. And then once you understand how each other work, then you kind of space those meetings out, but you still want to continuously have meetings to keep them updated on what's going on, keep them updated on what opportunities that you are working on, because that's going to get them motivated. So I might say something like, hey, Dana, that lead that you submitted, yesterday, I've got an appointment. I'm going to check it out tomorrow. Right. So they get excited for little things like that. And then when you get a contract, hey, shoot them a text message. Hey, we got a new contract from this lead that you submitted last week. Right. Hopefully that closed. We're working on the buyer right now. So just pretty much kind of keeping them up to date and communicating with your VA as if they were in office with you. Right. But the main mistakes, is like I said, in the beginning was not investing in the software, to be completely honest, because for me, it's all about efficiency. So you have to be able to do this efficiently. So what I was doing when I first got started, try cold calling on your cell phone. It's going to take hours to get through as many contacts as we need to get through to get an opportunity. So invest in the software so you can be more efficient in dialing these people and getting in contact with more people in a shorter period of time. And that's going to pretty much speed up the process of getting more leads and opportunities. So that was like the first thing in the first 3 months. I try to manually do everything, try to do everything the cheap way. Didn't want to invest anything into it. And, I would just say, make the investment into all that stuff because it works.
For the people that are doing the calls themselves, what advice would you give them to deal with rejections? Because when you're cold calling, it's a numbers game. You get so many people, you have to make so many calls, and you get so many people just upset at you. How do you deal with that? Like, what would you say to a newer investor?
Yeah. So for me, I always tell people it's the mindset first, right? Why are you doing this? Like, look at it from the whole perspective. Like, why the hell did you decide to jump into this business anyway? Right? Whether it's, you want to provide for your family, whether you want to generate wealth, you want to create freedom, right? All these different things. You always got to keep that in mind, right? It's always the mindset first when it comes to cold calling. And then the second part of it is you have to understand it comes with the job, right? And then know when I first got started cold calling, I know that this isn't the end for me, right? This is just a bridge to get me to the next step, right? And while I'm doing this, is helping me build my skill set. It's helping me understand how to have conversations with people I don't know, people I've never met, right? It's making me more comfortable, right? So the more you do it and the repetition, the better you're going to get over time. So it's always keep the end goal in mind first. Always stay focused on the prize, right? If what your goal is stronger, if your why is strong, then you're gonna be able to do what you got to do to make it happen. And just know that it's only for a short period of time until you get that first deal or until you get that next deal or whatever the case may be, whatever your situation may be. You just have to understand it's part of the game. And then when you do start calling people, don't take anything personal. It's just business, right? If they curse you out, laugh about it. If they say no, on to the next, right? I always tell people no is the best answer you can get because that lets me know I don't need to spend my time with you. On to the next person, right? So that's some tips that I have for people who like get started cold calling. Just look at it as a way to learn how to get better, how to improve your skill set, to get more comfortable with talking to people. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to talk to people in this business, whether you're at a networking event, talking to people you don't know, whether you're talking to buyers you don't know, talking to closing attorneys you don't know, talking to real estate agents, whoever it is, you're going to have to learn how to jump out your cell and talk to people that you don't know. And know that, like I said, it's only for a short period of time. If you have that in mind, then you'll be all right.
I love that, man. I love what you said that people need to think about that this is not something that I'm going to do forever. Kind of what you did, like get enough deals to go and invest into a VA. I think a mistake sometimes people make is they cash their first deal and they spend all the money on like getting a new car or whatever, something that they don't really need right now. But I love kind of what you said, in the initial part of this call, that you went ahead, invested in a VA because you knew this is something you didn't want to do, and looking it as a bridge to get you to the other side when you don't have to do it. You still make part of your marketing, but you don't necessarily have to do this. Like you can just send it to someone else. We posted the link to the Facebook group if someone wants to go back and find a VA. There's like 60,000 people in that Facebook group. If you want to find someone, start with $5-6 an hour. If you make $10,000 on your first deal, that's like money for someone for the whole year that you can pay that. And
Yep.
you don't have to do cold calling. And all they have to do is just get you one more deal. and they're more than paid for themselves. That's
That's
just
it.
how you look at it. Yeah, that's exactly how you look at it. I love that, man. And as a question, what dialer do you use? You mentioned call tools. Are you using a single line or a triple line dialer?
I use a triple line. So some
Triple line.
tips that I have with that. So with call tools, you can go up to 10 channels with 10 lines essentially. So like typically, like on my larger campaigns, I do like more lines. So I might do like 4 or 5 lines at one time going through the prospects. But it's really a balance between the wait time between calls and the abandon rate, meaning the amount of people who are getting missed or maybe calling back that the VA isn't able to gather because she's probably on a call with somebody else. So, I'm gonna just talk about some tips with the dialer, right? So a couple tips that I recommend if you're using triple line dialer for cold calling, at least 6 different numbers. You need 6 different phone IDs, right? With multiple numbers. You can't use the same numbers because they're gonna get burned out, right? So at least 6 to cycle through pretty frequently. Limit your dials to no more than 300 dials per number per day, right? So limit your dials to no more than 300 dials per number per day. Okay.
All right. Okay. So if you have 1,000 numbers to call, use at least 3 phone numbers,
Mm-hmm.
three
Yes.
different phone numbers. Okay.
Yes. Consistently add fresh data, right? Always add fresh data to your list because you want to keep replenishing your list and giving yourself fresh opportunities and new opportunities, especially to your VAs, right? Recycle the campaigns, keep recycling them because you've already paid for the data. People's situations change every season. You never know. So just keep recycling that data over and over again and squeeze as much juice as you can from the orange as possible. Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the most important thing that I've noticed. With not just with cold calling, any marketing, it's being consistent, just
Mm-hmm.
doing the same grind day in, day out. It's a numbers game, you know. You might get lucky, you might be the luckiest person to make the first call and the person is ready to sell. But if you are consistent and you keep doing the same thing over and over again, it's just a matter of time before you get a deal under. And Muhammad shared a really good resources, how to get your number remediated from
Mm-hmm.
spam. This is something just so they know we already do this for any number in REsimpli. We follow the process for every single number just to make sure it doesn't get marked as spam. So right now, our success rate is about 95 to 97% on that. Gage, Dylan has a question. How long would you cold call yourself before hiring a VA? I'm working my second deal now. First deal closes Friday, projected 20,000 for the month. Like for the deal. What would you do? Like if it were you, you're getting your
Mm-hmm.
first deal and you're gonna make 20,000. What would you do with that? And you don't like cold calling.
Well, first the question was, how did you find that deal?
Yeah.
Right? Well, however the hell you found that deal, do that again and again and
Yeah.
again, right? That would be my thing. But if you want to do cold calling, how long to cold call? I would say probably a month or so, right? If you can do it consistently, just so you can understand one, the software, understand the tools, understand, what the VAs or what your VAs might go through, some of the objections that they might hear, so you can, and also to create some rebuttals so you can respond back to those. So when you do hire your VA, you can kind of coach them and train them through how to handle these objections and all these things. And so you can understand really what that person would be going through on a day-to-day basis. Some people think you can just hire a VA and they're going to start generating leads every single day. Well, that's not always going to be realistic, right? Then at the same token, you want to sit in your seat, sit in that seat and do it as well, because here's what can happen, right? And I've had people come to me and ask me about this. A VA, they hired a VA, they only brought in maybe one lead in a month. Well, something ain't right, right? So if I get in the seat and I know if I'm calling, I can generate about 3 to 4 leads a day, then I know my VA should be able to generate at least half of that. So when you
Yeah.
hire a VA and they're not generating any leads or any opportunities, and you calling the same campaigns, calling the same list, then something's wrong.
Absolutely. Do the work you're gonna give a VA first, so you know what the right expectations are. Once you set up the systems and process it, it makes it so much. You know exactly where the break point is in your process, and then you can adjust. And you know exactly what you hold your VA accountable for. Yeah, no, great advice. And Tara said Ty has a great Insta account where he shares loads of information. I just put a link to his Instagram account, guys, if you want to connect with Ty. And someone had a question: have you been sued by litigators during cold calling? No, he already answered that.
No, I got threatened, but no.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a question from how do you route your incoming calls from call to where are those calls going, or do you not get many calls?
Yeah, we get them because what happens is when your VA dials out, right? Let's say it dial out and you have somebody call you back. I put them in like a queue, for example, while she's dialing. So she'll get an inbound call that comes in. But I just took a picture of what Muhammad said because I will implement that because I think that's very valuable. I haven't set up like an IVR, but I think for my inbound calls, I'm gonna start doing that.
That's what I've seen. Like some investors have seen, like any incoming call from cold calling, when you initially cold calling, not when they become a lead, or SMS, they just have all the calls go to voicemail because majority of them are going to be, hey, take me off the list, don't call me, don't call me. So you're not like wasting your time answering those calls. And they're just, people that are interested, like maybe 5-10% of them, they just call them back and take everybody else off the list. Yeah. So, or you can like set up an IVR in that case. So it just pushes. Cool. Ty, thank you so much for sharing this information, man. It was absolutely fire. I appreciate it. Again, guys, I shared Ty's Insta accounts. If you want to connect with him, he shares tons and tons of great information. He's made some amazing videos on how he uses REsimpli in his business with drip campaigns and tons of other stuff. So definitely check him out. Ty, thank you so much again for coming on this call, man, sharing your information. I appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on the call. I'll see you guys on the next week call. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Sharad.
Thank you, Ty. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.